the influencer's journey. And today's topic is I am not a unicorn. And can you believe it? I am sitting down with Suzanne today and we are unpacking this conversation. So, Suzanne, we have to let our super achievers know how you came up with this title for this interview. Okay, I am not a unicorn. So I've done countless of shows, countless of interviews. I don't think I've ever heard of such an interesting title before. So how did you come up, or how did we come up? Let our super achievers know how we came up with this saying.
So, how many of you have ever had people who put you on a pedestal?
Oh
Right?
yeah.
They look at you and they ooh and ah and they say you're so amazing and oh my
Mm.
gosh, you're so special and you got superpower gifts and no one does it like you and oh my goodness, and they just go on and on and on. And for me, that has always been uncomfortable for two reasons. One is
Mm.
I know I'm going to fall off the pedestal and shatter. And two is when I fall, I'm going to piss them off. So I don't particularly like it. So whenever someone gets into that mode, I call it the fan mode.
Mm-hmm.
My saying is, honey, I'm not a unicorn.
Mm.
And people will look at me and go, what?
What?
I'll go, I'm not a unicorn. I said, because I'm just like you. I may be just a few steps, a few years, a few lessons ahead of you. I am not, I'm a average person who's chosen to create an extraordinary life. That's my commitment.
Yeah.
And my extraordinary is probably for some people just getting started, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always just kind of put that out there in my attempt to level the playing field and to have people say, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it. If she can get started and create what she's creating, why not me?
Yeah.
And so it was really my way of just not getting in the us and them conversation, the I am
Yeah.
here and you are there conversation. And it really was really putting to people that I'm a few steps ahead of you. That's really what it is. I'm a few steps ahead, possibly because I said yes earlier. I started earlier. So that's where it comes from.
I love it. But it's so true, right? Because I've experienced that, before, and I still do experience it at some times where people, will think that they'll see you at a level or they'll see you doing certain things. And they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky," or "I wish I was you." I think that's the one that I get all the time. I wish my
Mhm.
life was, like that. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Your life can't be like that, right? You just have to, make the decision. That's where it all starts. It all starts with the decision. And then just uncovering, the things or the steps that need to happen to make it like that, right? But it's such an interesting concept, to see sometimes how people kind of discount themselves,
Yeah.
from certain situations. And even to me, like I said, one of my promises and my commitment on the show is to be totally transparent, right, about the things that I've experienced on the journey, experienced and going to experience on the journey. Like sometimes I do feel that way sometimes, right? Like when I look at certain things and then it's almost like I have to shake myself, like, what are you talking about? You can have that.
Yeah.
So make the decision. Is that what you want to go after? Is that what you truly want? And then the next step is finding out, what do I have to do, to make that a reality, and then go to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So in preparing for this episode, and it has really been doing a lot for me, because I felt that this particular episode, I had the opportunity to learn a little bit more, about you on a different level. So I know our super achievers are saying, what, they don't know everything about each other already?
We're going to do it live.
They work so closely. But, some things came up in our conversations that we've been having recently that I thought would be like really great to share with our super achievers, since we are really committed, to unpacking, this subject, this elusive thing, like we said, of influence, and what is influence, and how can we all get more of it. Okay. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so one of the things, I've heard you share your story. So we've been on trainings before when I've heard you share your story of being, well, actually, let me not share your story. For those super achievers out there who have not heard your story, go ahead and share with us a little bit of your story. I was about to tell your story for you. Go ahead and share your story.
It's interesting because it's an I think in many ways it's an average story. But however, it's the average story that most of us don't tell. And so how many of you have had a situation where you've woken up and thought, this can't be my life. Like, this is not what I planned. And I remember one of the days where I was standing at work and I was at the bottom of 4 steps and I was crying. I was fighting tears. And because I didn't have the energy to move myself up 4 steps. And I was so embarrassed and so ashamed because I was the manager and I was the manager of a crisis team. And
Wow.
there I was sitting in the middle of work, absolutely, totally in crisis. I knew I was on this emotional roller coaster that if you looked at me sideways, I'd either cry, want to scream, or punch you. That's not normal. when crisis is what you're up to. I didn't want to be where I was anymore. The job had lost its excitement for me. Although I loved what I did, I loved the boss I worked for. I really enjoyed working with my team. However, I think it was for me, I had stopped growing. And if you know me, I love growth. And on the home front, I was in a marriage that was falling apart due to financial struggles. And all I kept thinking is, I can't work any harder. I don't have any more hours in the day. How am I going to make more, do more, become more? And so that question was burning inside of me. And I was pissed off because I'd gone to school. I have 7 years of post-secondary education. I'd climbed the proverbial ladder and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I felt like, why did I do all this if this is where I was going to end up? At the same time, I'm going back and forth to my doctor, and I am pretty convinced that there's something wrong with me. And my doctor looks at me, and I have him run blood work and do. And one day he sits me down and he goes, Suzanne, you're healthy, honey, but you're not well.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I had no clue. I didn't get it. And he said, well, there's nothing physically wrong with you, but how you're doing life is going to put an end to you if you keep up this way. That's a harsh message.
Right.
And of course, now I start to bawl and I start to cry. And I don't, it's that moment where you have a choice, but I don't know the choice I'm required to make. So I decide to go home. I have another cry. I have my pity party. And then I decide something's got to give.
Mm.
And in that moment, I decided I was going to begin the process of leaving my job.
Mm.
And while I'm going through that, I get a phone call from a friend by the name of Susan. And Susan tells me about this network marketing company she's found. And I know y'all going to say network marketing, really? Because that's what I said. And all I kept thinking is, you want me to be an Avon lady? You want me to be a Tupperware person? That is not going to happen for me. And so what we decided was I was going to look at information. When I finally looked at the information and I saw what I saw and I got more educated, I decided to take my leap of faith. That leap of faith, Taria, I thought I was ready for it.
Yeah.
I thought I had all these transferable skills. I thought it would be like I would just go from zero to success. How many of you think you're going to jump into entrepreneurship and it's going to happen because you had success at your job, you're rocking it, you're at the top of your game, which is kind of how I would describe good leadership skills, good management skills, good people skills, overachiever, great habits. That's who I be to myself. Then I get into this deal called Entrepreneurship, Network Marketing, Solopreneurship. And for a year and a half, pretty well nothing happens. And I am confronted by myself.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so true, right? And I have to say, like, my journey, I could tell you my story parallels yours, because I remember before I stepped onto the journey, I was just like, yeah, I just got my MBA, I'm ready, can't tell me nothing, I'm gonna start my business and I'm gonna crush it. Right. Nothing. And realize that, it really is work. But, so one of the things I've heard you share your story, countless times. Every time I hear it, it still gives me the goosebumps, I still get
Mhm.
the chills. But one of the things that I think that I definitely missed, in the transition. And I want our super achievers, to really understand some things as we're talking about this journey to influence. So, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what gave you the courage, to get back up and keep going?
That's a that's a great
Yeah,
question.
because I was just about to say, sometimes, when life bowls us over, we just like, oh my gosh, can I just crawl under the rug now? But what is it that really gave you that courage?
One of the things was doing a personal inventory.
Mm,
And the realization was that I had given myself a lot of leeway to have a lot of self-pity. I'm just going to keep
mm,
it real. A lot of self-pity. I had given myself a lot of leeway to play the blame game. I had given myself a lot of leeway to sit in shame. And shame is like the most debilitating emotion.
yeah.
And I remember the time that it happened was I would go to my bank account and it was in a negative, and it had been in a negative for, it felt like forever. And I get so ashamed and I create this story about how horrible I was. And if
Mm,
everybody found out, how disappointed they would be. And one day I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go to my bank account. I'm going to look. And I looked and it was still the same thing. However, I didn't give myself the permission to create the pity party story.
yeah.
And what I realized in that moment was that I had to take responsibility for what I wanted. Because until that time, I had given responsibility away to everyone else.
Yeah.
I had given responsibility for my my happiness and my this to my ex-husband, my financial abundance to my job. Will you give me a raise? Will you give me this? I had put absolved myself of personal responsibility and was di- just coughing it off on all these different people. And I had no, and in doing so, I had no control.
Yeah.
It's kind of playing the waiting game for people to make things better for you, and they're not going to do it. And so I had to ask myself, am I willing to take 100% responsibility for where I am and the life I want?
Yeah.
And I think what really motivated me was I was disappointed in where I was
Yeah.
and the pain of where I was. I thought anything could be better than this. So I decided I was going to be responsible.
Hmm.
So that was the first thing. I think the second thing, I mentioned my mother at the top of the show. And and the second thing for me was that I had watched her go from zero, nothing, coming to this country with dollars in her pockets and creating this life. And I thought, if she can do that and start where she did, there was no excuse for me.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no excuse. And that began the beginning. And that's also what allowed me not to quit
Yeah.
when I was a year and a half in, and I felt like all my colleagues had lapped me and left me sitting in my starting blocks at 0, and they were already at like the finish line. Right. And I was like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And it's so true, right? When we get to that point where, we honestly accept responsibility, for ourselves in a situation,
Mhm.
like things shift. So
Absolutely.
awesome, awesome. And so the next question that I'm going to unpack. Okay, so we have some challenges here, right? And we decided that we're going to take some responsibility, for some stuff and take responsibility for ourselves. That's one thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is, what inspired you to take your journey publicly? Sharing it with others is a whole different ball game.
It's actually kind of how we started the top of the hour, was that, I was a very private person, and I will say I was prideful, right?
Mm,
Wanted to look good. So I kept all my stuff under wraps. What I began to see were people thought I was lucky.
mm,
People thought I had always had the success. The people who met me and came in after I had kind of gone through a lot of my struggles and was still struggling, but I wasn't struggling at the level that they were struggling, so they didn't notice my struggle, if that makes sense.
mm. Yeah.
And what I began to see was that when I didn't share and no one else was sharing their struggles, what happened for people was they were asking themselves, what's wrong with me?
Mm,
And I found myself colluding in that by not sharing my truth.
mm. Wow.
Right. And so I got to a point where I said, you know what? All I wanted was someone to tell me I was okay. All I wanted was someone to tell me, you're going to do this. All I needed was someone to say, you know what? Just keep going. You got everything you need inside you to create the success you desire.
Yeah.
And so that was the motivation to share, was to be authentic and transparent so that I could inspire hope
Yeah.
and say, and really be saying, if I can do it, trust me, I've struggled in this journey. I was not good at this. If I can get here, I
Yeah.
truly believe that you can get there. And it was through my stories of my lowest lows, my biggest failures, my I don't knows, my struggles, that people saw themselves and said, you're right, I can do it. Because if you can do it and come from that place, why not me?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that that's so key because, like you said, there are a lot of people out there, who are going through things. They're suffering in silence, and they're doing the internal beatdown on
Yeah.
themselves. And just listening and learning. It's all about going back to, once again, that word responsibility. So first we have a responsibility for ourselves, to ourselves, and then also the responsibility to kind of share the journey, because knowing, and what one of the things that I'm coming to learn and to better appreciate, and I try to remember it, like every time life is kicking my butt, I try
Yeah.
to I try to remember this. The experiences for me, but the lessons, are for others.
Mhm.
So the quicker that I could, survive the beat down, say, okay, that happened. What did I learn? And now go out and share, I'm going to bless,
Yeah.
others with it. So I absolutely love that. That's the realization that you've come to, or you came to. We all thank you for it. I know the world is definitely a better place because you
Well,
decided, to share your journey.
and this is the interesting thing. And I want everybody to really get it. It's work to hide out.
Yeah.
It's work to hide out behind perfection. It's work to hide out behind letting go,
Yeah.
not letting go. It's work to hide out behind looking good.
Yeah.
And so the minute I decided to be authentic, life became fun.
Yeah.
The stage became my playground, and I found a freedom to be me
Yeah.
and to bring all of me to everywhere I go. And so it was no longer about, do I look good? It
Yeah.
was, am I in this journey truly?
Yeah.
Am
I
I
love
in this journey fully, authentically, ready to play full out? And am I prepared to fail
it. Yeah.
so that I can learn what I'm willing to learn? And sometimes I fail publicly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a big old wonderful fail. I'm required to humble myself, pick myself up. Sometimes it's make apologies and keep it moving. That's actually the journey though.
And I hope our super achievers are getting this. Listen to the language that we're putting around that word fail. And so even me have learned to embrace that, as one of the best things that can happen. One of the
Mhm.
best things that can happen is that you could fail. And the bigger you fail, the more you learn and the
Mhm.
more growth that comes out of it. So absolutely wonderful. Now, so we're talking about, all of this juicy stuff. And one of the things that I know on the journey, there's always going to be opposition. So it's always nice to think that, when we're going through these things and we're stepping out and we're, affecting change in the world, everyone is going to be on our side and we're going to have the support. It's like, you have, people who walk and then they have the whole fan club
Yeah.
of them, right? If only life was really and truly that way. But we know that it's not.
No.
So what are some of the challenges that you faced on the journey, or even some of the pushbacks from your counterparts when you decided, to step out and share your journey publicly?
Well, I think the first one was I don't know about anybody else, but when I decided to do the do and I decided to take my leap of faith, I was certain people were going to jump with me. And I thought there were people going to jump with me physically, like they were going to come with me on the journey. I thought there were people that were going to jump emotionally. In other words, they were going to cheer me on. I thought people were going to jump. When I took my leap of faith, two people jumped with me. Two.
Mm,
My mother,
yes.
because my mother was just excited that I was stepping out.
I was just like, God
And
bless moms.
oh yeah, she was just excited. She's like, "Girl, I don't know what you're doing, but you go." And my closest friend, Cindy, who still
Mhm.
collaborates with us now, she
Yes.
was like, "I'm gonna be your first customer. I'm gonna be your first this. I'll go here with you. I'll go there." She was just my ride to die.
Yeah.
The sad thing for me was not only did many other people say no, they criticized me.
Yeah.
They made fun of me. They poked holes in my dreams. They wore me out to the point I decided that if you weren't in my conversation, I was not having a conversation with you because I had not yet built my emotional fortitude
Yes.
to have it bounce off me like I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. I was a baby in the fight and they were running me over. So I had to find myself some great mentors who had done what I wanted to do and just immerse myself in that space. So that was the first thing. The second thing, was really interesting was, of course, everybody knows I'm a Black woman. I'm a woman of color. And I happened to join a company where I was probably one of the first who looked like me.
Mm.
And I remember that there'd be certain people and I remember one gentleman sitting me down with all the kindness you can muster, looking me dead in the face and saying, because of who you are,
Yeah.
success is going to take you way longer than everybody else.
Mm.
It may take you like 10 years. I was like, I don't have no 10 years. I was like, and and it was such um, a taking aback for me
Yeah.
that I was like, what are you talking about? Now, the one thing you don't tell Suzanne Hart is that she can do something, because that's motivation, inspiration. That is like, I'm about to dig in and get the baby done. So there was those sorts of things where people didn't see in me what I believed was in me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing was, you know, at some point in life, we have to find the courage to walk to our own beat.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, the other big learn was when I was doing it the way everybody else was doing it wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
So this sales process, this entrepreneurial process, whatever it was, whatever the how that was common was not my how in terms of my cellular being, if you will. So as long as I was doing those scripting, the things and all the things I was learning, yes, they were excellent tools. They just weren't my tools. And so at some point, I decided that if I was going to do this, I was going to do it my way. Now, when I talk about my way, it wasn't that I reinvented the wheel. There's a way to do network marketing, that there is a way to do network marketing. There's a way to do success leaves clues.
Right.
The interesting thing was that we all have to bring our personality, our energy, our authentic self to those tools.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we bring the way that everyone seems to be showing up to that space, to those places. And
Mhm.
so for me, it was really around, am I prepared to show up
Yeah.
as Suzanne? Like 100%. Am I prepared to, when I say have a party, that's
Yeah.
kind of how I like to do business. You know, music, dancing, it's a good time. Let's get it done in fun and play. And if it's not fun and play, why are we doing it? It was that energy that made things happen for me. I love community. So it was building team and building community and truly believing that if I built a community, the magic would happen and things would move. And I had to commit to that.
Yeah.
I had to commit to stepping into my strengths. If anyone's done Strengths Finder, I was trying to make my weakness a strong weakness versus just capitalizing and making
Right.
my strength like just this rocking,
Yeah.
powerful thing, and surrounding myself with people who had skills and talents different than mine. When I started just taking that on, things began to happen. I had to be courageous enough to know myself and say, this is what I'm committed to doing.
Yeah. I think you said so much, in that last question. You reminded me, of my journey. And this is the thing. I remember, sitting, on my 9 to 5, like everybody else, just a complaining. You fuss every day. You punch the clock to fuss, right?
Mhm.
And you complain every day, and you get off of work and you take all of those disgruntled feelings home, and you discuss it with your spouse, and you talk about it. You got little babies, they don't know. You just talking to them, they're like, I don't know, mom. And I remember too when I made the decision, and I thought that I would have definitely had more support and
Yeah.
more people in my corner when I decided to step out. And I stepped out, and people were like, "What? Are you crazy? Like, are you kidding me? You're going to walk away from that?" And I'm like, uh, yeah. I am. And what was so interesting that you talked about, and I have to say this for the super achievers, who are going through this, because once again, it's a journey. Sometimes you really do have to separate yourself, right?
Yeah.
From the naysayers and the people who don't understand. And I had to come to learn that they're naysayers not because they're bad people. They're naysayers because they're concerned, right? But I wasn't strong enough,
Yeah,
to hear,
it
you
takes
know,
a moment.
yeah, I wasn't strong enough to receive that type of love.
And one of the things, Taria, that I learned was, and I remind myself, is that when God blesses me with an idea, God blesses me with
Yeah.
something I'm required to do, it's my blessing.
Hmm.
And so it's not for anyone else to understand it or get it or move on it. It's mine.
Yes.
And one of my biggest learns is when I move powerfully and I move confidently and I start to figure it out.
Yes.
That's when other people start to move
Got to
with me.
see. Yeah. Yeah.
They can't move if I'm standing still,
Right.
and
Right.
they won't move if I'm uncertain.
Right.
So I have to step out in certainty. I have to take the leap of faith. I'm required to move and start figuring it out, and then watch people gravitate.
And
And there's those people that are waiting to see if you fail.
I was just about to say, it's such an amazing thing to see,
Yeah.
right? Like when you make the decision and you get into action, how people come around, because I've experienced that too. Like some of the people who are like, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" Years later, they're like, "Oh, share with me how you did that. Can you tell me? Oh, it's really working for you, huh?" And I'm just like, yeah, right. So it's always like a beautiful thing, to see
Yeah.
on a journey. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, and one of the things that I've always thought of asking, and I was so surprised when we were talking about this the other day, like I have to include it as a
Oh dear.
question for our super achievers. Okay. So, what was the catalyst for the conversation on leadership and mindset? So, let me just kind of tee it up a little bit for our super achievers. So, Susan and I, we've spent some time in the studio recording. And so we got brand new training coming out, y'all. Super excited about that. And I remember the first time I heard you do your training on leadership. Like
Mhm.
and it wasn't a thing, and I'm just gonna let super achievers know. Like this is how God shows up and he blesses me on my journey. Like I didn't see this training advertised anywhere. I didn't register for this training, anything, right? I just happened to be in the room for the training by default. Okay. So we're going to talk about what happens, on the other side of some things, right? So, and I sat there and literally glued, to the screen.
Mhm.
I kid you not, I probably took like 15 pages of notes that day and was totally blown away. Never heard leadership, spoke of, trained, talked about, in the manner that you do. So, what was your inspiration for your conversation? Because I think it's such a unique conversation on leadership and mindset.
Taria, almost all my trainings come from my own struggle.
Mm,
So if I learn something, chances are I'm going to write a training about it. That's just kind of
mm,
how I do. And so what motivated it was that time in that year when I was stuck, that year and a half. And I kept watching all these people that were having success, really the top people, and then watching people in other industries that had success. And I was kind of like I have all the skills. I'm doing what they have. I could actually train a lot of the skills better than most of the people I saw. So I was like, what is it that they got that I don't have? Any super achiever out there ask that question? Like, what is it that they got that I don't have? And as I began to study and unpack it, it wasn't the skill set that they had, it was this way of being.
yeah.
And this way of being was that they had a confidence and a knowing that came from the journey.
Mm,
They had a confidence and knowing because they took 100% responsibility for this thing I believe called leadership. And they were the example of what was possible. They were the example of their vision. They were the example of hope. And they were being out loud what they were asking people to become. And I thought, oh, leadership is being an example.
Yeah.
Leadership is about being so confident in who you be. And I'm not saying perfect, I'm saying confident in who you be, your ability to figure things out, your commitment to get things done, your willingness to persist, your ability to have integrity and count on yourself. It's having such a certainty in that when you show up, it oozes from you. And when people see you, they see you as a consistent person, a consistent way of showing up. And I thought, I want to figure that out. And so for me, if you know me, I think a lot. I noodle on things. I write, I draw, I break things down. And so the program came in my breaking it down, because not only was I struggling with it, the team that I was working with was struggling with it. And what I realized was leadership is not something I do to someone else.
Right.
It's something I do to me. I can't lead Taria or any other super achiever because I have no control over them.
Yeah.
The one person I have 100% control over is me. My thinking, my emotions, my skills, my character, my habits. And if I'm willing to take 100% responsibility for growing that and moving it from good to great, I will become a source of inspiration. And when I inspire, now I have influence. So when I was figuring it out, I kept saying to myself, so my word is, and my sentence has been for like 15 years now, I am inspiration.
Yeah.
And the first person I'm required to inspire is me.
Yes.
And so I want to wake up going, ooh, I was excited by who I was being today. Oh, I rocked who I was being today. And there's some days where it's average, and there's some days where you just floor yourself.
Yeah.
And living in that place had me get an understanding of leadership. And that's how the training was born.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. And this is one of the things that I always say all the time. Even having the ability to get to know you and work with you closer, you definitely shifted the way how I take a look at mindset. So it was first going into defining what leadership truly is, and then what mindset truly is, which, like, once again, totally blew my mind. And that's why I tell people all the time, like, this is my mindset mastery mentor, guys. Should get you one. Love it.
And,
All right. So,
and before we move on, I just want to touch on that for a moment, because mindset is our thinking.
yeah.
And our thinking creates everything else. It creates our communication, it creates our behaviors, our habits, our energy. And it's the one thing that as entrepreneurs, most of us spend no time on.
Yeah.
We are, what's the skills I need to learn? What experience do I need to get? What we want to remember, what I wanted to remember, is I take Suzanne everywhere.
Yeah.
And therefore, I have to master the thoughts that I have so that it comes out what I want, and who I desire to be comes out in my speaking, in my behaviors, in my energetics. That's mastery.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And so, once again, if you are a super achiever and you are catching the Influencers Journey Show, and any of this is hitting home for you, it's standing out, go ahead and let us know in the comments. Drop your big takeaways or any shares that you may have, and just let us know, like, what's happening for you on this conversation.